You are listening to Rouge Radio, a proud member of the Canadian Football Podcast Network.
It's time to get the point as Rouge Radio is ready to kick off.
Ready!
The best football talk with the best in the business.
So what is the cost? You have 2 first-round picks this year because the Argos are dumb enough to trade for Drew Willie.
A few rookies.
We go directly to the on-field product. We welcome to the show the 20th overall pick in this past Sunday's CFL draft, DeAndre Wright of the Alouettes. DeAndre, welcome to the show.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me.
And the occasional Hall of Famer.
Please welcome Doug Brown, who is one of the members of the current class of 2016 in the CFL Hall of Fame. Doug, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, guys, for the kind words and for having me on the program.
Rouge Radio is on the air. Here's your hosts, Robert Dalton and Tony Allen.
We are broadcasting live from Winnipeg, Manitoba, and Medicine Hat, Alberta. It's episode 350 of the Rouge Radio podcast, powered by the Canadian Football Podcast Network. My name is Robert Dalton, and joining me is Tony Allen. And if you were kind of tuned into last week's episode, I guess technically today is 351. So we will blame technology. Tony, how's everything?
Pretty good. And I guess technically it's in the system. You know what I'm saying? We're technically had a show. It just never quite made it to air.
Oh man, we should have posted some just kind of like best of, on the cutting room floor as they have it in Hollywood, because you had some rants, and it might have knocked you down in the giving you some negative points as opposed to one of our favorite listeners said last week, or wanted to give you some negative Eskimo fan points.
Yeah.
And now he wants to be an honorary host of the Rouge Radio podcast. I'm talking about Joe.
Yeah, that's a big honor. That's a lot to put on our plate.
You know what? I think it's going to be like I don't want to say it's kind of like who's that guy? Oh man, the Whack Pack or the whatever Howard Stern. He has those guys showing. I'm not liking Joe as to any of those guys. We could be a guy that just chimes in every now and then. Maybe we could get like a voicer. Whenever one of us says something stupid or says something smart ass, and we'll just have a recording of Joe overhead. Well, I mean, is there anything from last week's show that was worth repeating that nobody really heard?
Unless we had some pretty sweet hot takes, which we usually do. I think, it mostly just came down to game predictions.
Do you really want to talk about? Do you want to talk about Mike Riley and the difference between he and Bo Levi Mitchell?
Yeah, I could probably go. Actually, I even had it set up, like the meme I joked about on the show. I even had it set it up, and it's too bad it never got to air, although I could have potentially lost all new followers in the Eskimo fan base that I might have gained last week by being on the Eskimo Empire podcast. So maybe it's best I don't go down that road after Edmonton won, and all those topics aren't as hot table kind of topics. So maybe I'll just let it go and see what this week's game against the this week's game. Well, I guess they've got a bye week, so next week's game for the Eskimos bring. Okay.
One thing that we'd like to forget is the fact that our pick'ems last week, we all went 1 for 3. We both had the Red Blacks, we both had the Eskimos, and we both had the Bombers. Save for the Eskimos, who tried as they might. It almost seemed like that they did their best to give that game away. But man, oh man, did that week turn out? I mean, I guess it's something that we really want to take up, because we're going to talk about the entertainment value of the CFL. I mean, this past week is just something. It's just some ugly football, don't you think?
Yeah, the entertainment value for some reason want to be there this season, and a lot of good players out there, a lot of good potential games, but they never come to fruition.
All right, well, let's get into our 3 down hot takes. And the first off is, speaking of entertainment, we'll talk about the Johnny Manziel effect. And yeah, we're talking Johnny football. And the only reason that we're really talking about this is there has been a lot of subpar quarterbacking play. And I saw a lot of people with, we talked about Jonathan Jennings last week, although nobody really heard it. and everybody and all the fans in BC were clamoring, well, maybe the Lions should trade Jennings to Hamilton for Johnny Manziel, and then everybody in Rider Nation wanted, hey, let's trade someone from our star-studded quarterback crew to Hamilton. Let's get Johnny Manziel. And then all of a sudden we have some NFL scouts just chiming in, checking in to see about his attitude. So are we starting to see the Johnny Manziel effect? Are we kind of will we actually see Johnny Manziel take a snap at all this season?
I think there will be some pressure on Hamilton to start getting him in games, especially if the NFL scouts are now starting to call the Tiger Cats and saying, what can you tell us? How is his attitude? How is his looking? I'm sure there's probably those that would bring Manziel in regardless in the NFL, because I don't follow the league closely, but I do listen to sports talk radio, and there was a lot of talk about the poor quality of quarterbacks in the NFL last season as well. So people will be interested, but it makes it a lot more interesting if they have something to go on from Manziel. Eventually, Johnny's camp is going to want to get some time in, saying, listen, I have a schedule too I'm on. I want to get to the NFL, and he'll need to see the field for that. I don't know how much it's going to come. Hamilton's probably going to need to take control of games a little bit deeper than they have in the past. Comfortable wins, but maybe a little bit deeper. Manziel needs to get the football and get on the field. With quarterbacks kind of dropping around the Canadian Football League, it will be interesting to see where that talk goes, because regardless of what we think of him, Manziel is still a somewhat experienced quarterback. He's not a stranger to starting games and high-pressure situations, so there could be somebody else around there that might kind of panic themselves and pull the trigger on a trade.
I don't know what to think about this, because up until the moment that he signed, I was to the belief that he was never actually going to see not only see the field, but I didn't even believe he was going to put pen to paper in regards to a contract. And lo and behold, June Jones and the Tiger Cats put that theory away. And I don't know in what scenario. Yeah, you mentioned that the Hamilton Tiger Cats are going to have to put away opponents very early and very often for us to see him, because, yeah, I mean, if he wants to take that road back to the NFL, he's going to have to see the field in one way or another. The Hamilton Tiger Cats offensive line has been really good. I mean, I wouldn't say best in the league, but I would definitely say top 4 in the CFL. Jeremiah Masoli has been really good. Obviously, the record stands by itself, and obviously there's going to be some doubters, but he's stats-wise, you're not going to take him at all. I think Jeremiah Masoli has made it known that he's not going to let Manziel talk be a factor or a distraction in that Hamilton Tiger Cats locker room. But at one point, there's got to be someone from the Johnny football camp that's got to be like, hey, listen, we got to get this guy a start. And if Hamilton ends up securing a playoff position in the East, whether it's the East or the first in the East, or at least a home playoff date, I could see somewhere around October or November where they may let him. Hey, listen, here's your shot. Let's get you some snaps. Let's get you some reps. But until then, I don't foresee a scenario where Johnny Football actually takes a snap, and I can understand if his agent, someone from his crew, is like, hey, listen, let's get this guy into a situation where he will be taking that snaps. And right now, I mean, yeah, Travis Luley did what he did last week, but it was only in a half of football. I don't know what their quarterback situation is going to be like in the coming weeks in BC, and obviously with Saskatchewan being Saskatchewan, who knows what's going to happen with Bridge or who, I mean, Darrell Watford, or even if Zach Claus is going to see the ball or see the field in the next coming week. So, I mean, I said he wasn't going to be in the CFL, and don't take my word, but I don't think he's going to see the field at all. From one NFL bust to another, we go to probably the oldest person that will ever dress for the CFL since Damon Allen. Terrell Owens triggered his 10-day window to get a contract signed. For me, Tony, I don't know about you, but for me, when it comes to Terrell Owens, this is more so, hey, he's interested in the CFL, and if it's going to happen, he prefers it to be out east. And this is his way of saying, hey, offer me a contract so I can turn it down so I can become a free agent. And then someone from out east, maybe someone from Toronto, maybe Hamilton, maybe even Montreal could put me on the negotiating list so I can get a contract from there. But, I mean, to be honest, if you're going to be dumb enough...
For the Edmonton Eskimos, and something has to be in play here where Edmonton, seemingly out of the blue, wants Terrell Owens and put him on a neg list. And then Owens activates it. Right out of the gate, something feels like there was a side deal right out of the gate. Like Owens' camp started calling CFL teams and saying, listen, are you interested in this? Can you put him on this list? It's odd to think that something that seemed so random by the Eskimos has now already elevated to this point. This wasn't the Ticats and Johnny Manziel, and it took a long time to develop, whereas Manziel wanted to go to the CFL. Then he ends up going to some Southern U.S. league, development league, not sure, and then coming together. This is like bam, 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 like nothing happened. Boom, the Eskimos put him on the neg list out of nowhere, and then boom, Owens activates the 10-day signing list period. So right out of the gate, something's happening here. I don't know how it develops, but I feel like we're not getting the whole story. On top of that, Eskimos probably agree, because if Owen does want to go out east, he's obviously asked the Eskimos to some way be their conduit to get this thing started. If I had to pick, Owen is good friends with Ocho Cinco, who we saw in Montreal. Maybe he's trying to get out there. Maybe he heard good things. It is weird. We spent a season and a half declaring that Johnny Manziel was never going to come to the Canadian Football League. The whole Johnny Manziel saga, he's just not coming. He's not coming. It's ridiculous. I don't know why they have this neg list, and then we ripped the whole neg list system apart. And then look what happened. Johnny Manziel accepts the Canadian Football League. I think it is foolish to declare again, less than a year later, that someone's not going to sign, because I have no idea how this is going to work out now. But I am definitely not going to say that this is a non-starter. It's a non-story. Something's there. Something's happening. And for some reason, out of the blue, this just happened, which makes me think it wasn't so out of the blue. So I'm interested to see where this story goes. And no, I am not even close to claiming that nothing's going to happen here. So it might not develop, but there's no way I'm crazy enough with the Canadian Football League to declare this thing a non-story.
As we go to almost maybe perhaps a non-story, the Toronto Argonauts signed star running back Devin McCluster, and I use star loosely because I don't follow the NFL. I don't know these names. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to tell me that, hey, I know enough about Tom Brady. Yes, I know Tom Brady. I just don't know his stats good enough to say, hey, listen, this guy's really good. I just know he's been to a lot of Super Bowls and won them. But Devin McCluster, and I want to go through some of his stats through NFL. This is via NFL.com, and his biggest year. Now he's a running back, so I had to look on his rushing stats. His best year was in 2011 as a member of the Kansas City Chiefs. 16 games played, 114 carries, 516 yards, an average of 7.1 yards per carry. Or no, actually that's 7.1s per game, or at least an attempt per game. His average per carry was 4.5. So that's really good. And I'm thinking, okay, so why are the Argonauts getting a guy whose best year was 7 years ago? And then I go ahead and look at his receiving stats. His receiving stats, his best year was 2012 as a member of 2013 again as a member of the Kansas City Chiefs. He had 15 games played, 53 receptions, 511 yards for an average of 9.6 per reception, and he had 2 touchdowns, I believe 5 plays where the receptions were 20-plus yards. Not bad. And I'm thinking, wow, this is actually not a bad grab for the Toronto Argonauts. This is a guy obviously has worked hard with his pass blocking in the NFL, and he's an excellent receiver, which is something that the CFL likes to do. So I guess the question is right now, where does this stand with another NFL wannabe? I shouldn't say a wannabe, but another guy with aspirations, James Wilder Jr.
And is there a potential that the Argonauts have brought this guy in to protect himself in the event that Wilder Jr. decides to pack up and go to the NFL? I don't think you can replace Wilder that way, and this guy's definitely not going to do it. I don't think it forces him out the door. I think we all know where he wants to go as the seasons go further, and there's going to be try to get an escape plan. Toronto would be just ridiculous to do anything to disrupt what he brings to the game. So I don't think, as far as bringing a guy like this, how he's going to hurt or impact Wilder Jr.'s getting into the game and being part of the Argonauts offense, because the Argonauts' entire offense is going to revolve around him, and I don't think that does anything. I think it gives them a little more depth. It probably gives them a little more skill for different plays that they want to try and run, and maybe even a chance to use him in a different position on the offense to help out. It seems to be something they do. It could be a name that just simply draws in fans. It is Toronto, and just seeing some with an NFL label on them, there might be some people out there that start panting and get excited and go check out games. I think the bigger impact for me on this one is we saw Johnny Manziel come into the Canadian Football League. We've seen Tyrell Owens doing whatever he's doing, whether we like it or not, whether we like the player or not, drawing attention to the Canadian Football League south of the border again. And now we have this gentleman coming in, making a name going to try and make a name for himself in the Canadian Football League and the Toronto Argonauts. When I was texting you early in the week about what we might want to talk about, I see something here that we might even be able to call the Johnny Manziel influence on the Canadian Football League. Now you're seeing guys, they are not A-list football players, they're not in their prime, guys that are impact players, they're just NFLers saying, okay, I will go to Canada, whether we think they're going to come in and do something phenomenal. We are now seeing 3 players in the last year decide to choose the Canadian Football League. Will this make an impact this year? No. Are these players that are going to come in and make impacts to win Grey Cups? It is not going to happen, but we are starting to see possibly the potential of these NFLers saying, okay, maybe I will give the Canadian Football League a chance. In the past, we've signed sporadics. Ontario Smith, I think was his name, in Winnipeg. We saw Ricky Williams, but these were so sporadic. Now we have 3 in the window of a calendar year who's had their names attached to the Canadian Football League. Where does this go now from here? Do we see next year maybe a couple more veterans deciding, you know what, instead of sitting out for 3 or 4 years, I am not in this team's plan. Why don't I play out my mid to late 30s in the Canadian Football League now? And I'm not saying a mass exodus, but what if we see next year 1 or 2 guys say, you know what, the Canadian Football League is a legit for me now. So I want to see where this is going to go going forward. It's got me a little bit interested from that angle.
Well, we go from our 3 down hot takes. By the way, I forgot to mention that our 3 down hot takes are sponsored and brought to you by Seat Giant, seatgiant.ca. Make sure, if you're wanting a good deal on any kind of local events in your area, use the promo code Rouge for further discounts, as well as you're supporting Canadian-made podcasts such as this one. Well, especially this one if you're using the Rouge promo code. But hey, do us all a favor. Hey, let's get to this week's Magnificent Bastard. Tony, hey, shout out to Terrell Sutton, who was your Magnificent Bastard. And I know we don't usually like talking about this, but I figured it was worth it because you had a pretty decent speech. But who got your Magnificent Bastard for this week?
This week's Magnificent Bastard was influenced a little bit by Bo Levi Mitchell when I was listening to the Bo show yesterday. And, you know, it was difficult in a pretty sketchy week with only 3 games, and it was nice to pick out a great play. That's always fun to do when it comes to the Magnificent Bastard. But when I heard the stat line on this player, I thought, wow, it just blew my mind. And he was one of the players of the week this week, but totally downplayed on his part. We've got Duke Williams in Edmonton. Oh, let's talk about him. Let's go on. Travis Lulay came back, got his start, got a win. So, okay, we have to gush over Travis Lulay in a horrible football, exciting, horrible, whatever you want to call it, depending who you're cheering for. But Lulay, oh my gosh, we got to see Travis Lulay win a football game. What an amazing story. And, oh yeah, here's your third star. Well, we need to pick a third star. Let's just throw in a third star. Well, what did this third star just happen to do? He plays on defense, so I mean, whatever. Let's play tribute to the defense. He had, 2 tackles, 3 quarterback sacks, 2 forced fumbles. Yeah, that's a good day for a defense. We'll throw him a third star. It's pretty good. What caught my attention was this guy that did that. He did it in only 19 plays. He went in for only 19 plays in the entire football game, had 2 tackles, 2 forced fumbles, and he only 19 plays in the entire football game, and that much of an impact in the overall football game. That means in the few times he showed up in the game, when they sent him in, the 19 times where he played, every third play he did something that impacted the drive for that Calgary defense. So for a mind-blowing stat line like that, Micah Johnson of the Calgary Stampeders, you magnificent bastard.
It's too bad that we weren't doing this show around Christmas time, because the way that you're going, I thought you were going to end with a partridge in the pear tree. You're like 3 forced sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 1 interception, and a partridge in a pear tree. All right, nobody wants to pay attention. Yeah, no, he had a great game, and Calgary's defense, God forbid if they had something going wrong this season, and it just might be the occasional or the odd injury bug, which they seem to be bitten. Very rare sometimes, but it's hit or miss with them. But that defense just shut Ottawa's offense down, and after the first quarter, everybody was like, anybody who picked the Red Blacks to win, they were quickly changing their mind. Let's get into our Week 6 predictions as we start off on Thursday. In Tim Hortons Field, Saskatchewan Roughriders coming off the bye to play another team coming off the bye, the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Tony, where do you see this one going?
I see this one going in Hamilton's favor. They're back at home. They're a little disappointed that they didn't pick up a win potentially where they could be picking up wins. Mazzoli, I think, is still, when you go into this football, comparing what you have at the quarterback position, he is still everything you want in a quarterback right now. I am not going to start doubting him in any capacity. I like the Hamilton Tiger Cats as a whole when compared to a Saskatchewan team that doesn't really seem to have anything going for them. They've somehow managed to squeak out some wins, and you deserve the wins you get, but they're certainly not impressing anyone. I think if you try to make the case that Saskatchewan is persevering in a tough time, I think that's going a little bit too far. They've managed to win a couple of games, but by no means have they done anything in the first 5 weeks of this football season make me say, man, you got to watch out for this Riders team. They can really upset some teams. They could really ruin somebody's November with the way they're going, because I certainly don't think you can say that. The quarterback situation alone, there's alternating quarterbacks, platooning quarterbacks, and then there's doing whatever Chris Jones is doing. And then I know there was one fan page on Facebook, someone's like, oh no, I liked it when they did it with Mitchell and Drew Tate. But like, you know what? Maybe there was an instant where they used quarterbacks in Calgary in an alternating system, but it was definitely not like, well, let's see who's going to go in this time. Let's spin the wheel, and Brandon Bridge, you're going to go in for this drive. I don't really seeing it that's how Chris Jones is working the quarterbacks. If you're going to continue to put Duron Carter on defense, you are wrong. You don't build your team down so that way you can have two subpar sides of the ball. At least if it's me, I'm not taking my best weapon and playing him somewhere else and claiming that my defense needs him there, because if your offense is the best with Duron Carter on it, you go with your best players on defense to make it the strongest, and you know what? Figure out your defense literally anywhere else. Don't take your best weapon out, especially with quarterbacks that need some playmakers out there. Hamilton is too good. Saskatchewan's not good enough. 27-10 Ticats.
You just took the words out of my mouth. I can't add anything sensible to that. I other than saying ditto. I just think that right now, so I'm not going to say Saskatchewan's a hot mess, but they are one bad coaching decision away from being in that conversation. I really love their defense. I love their defensive line. I don't think that I don't think that it's being utilized as much as they can be with their 3-man rush. But when you take probably one of, if not the best receiver away from a core that really needs it based on your quarterback play, and you're going to put him in a position, one of the hardest positions defensively at cornerback, then I think you're really doing something. You're doing yourself a disservice. And right now, Hamilton, they're coming off the bye. They're at home. I think they outplayed Saskatchewan last time around. I can't imagine where they can outplay them 2 times in a row and not come up a favorable result. This is not going to be the same game. I think it might be a little bit better football, and I think Hamilton's going to take this one 25-13 as we move on to next Friday night. BC line off that come from behind miraculous victory to take on a team that's coming off a drubbing at home against the Ottawa Redblacks. I think I like Ottawa at this one. I think I don't like coming off. I don't like saying that one team, like one game, says it means everything for a season, unless you're the Montreal Alouettes last year, which just had that come from behind loss, or they just gave it away to Winnipeg, and then all of a sudden they lost every game last year. But when I look at this team, BC is not a very good team, and I'm not taking anything away from them. I think it was more so Winnipeg gave it away more so than BC took it. And I in Ottawa, they're coming off a drubbing, but it was against the Calgary Stampeders, and you know that they just want to put themselves back in the pedestal that they thought that they had, and they have first place in the East in line, and now that they are going to be playing a day after Hamilton, assumingly is going to win, and so I'm thinking that maybe Ottawa's going to come here and say, hey, listen, we got to keep pace with the Hamilton Tiger Cats, we got to play our ass off, we got to come in here and say, hey, listen, we want to host the East Final come November. We don't want to go in. We don't want to host the Eastern semifinal and play in Hamilton in November. We got this, and we got to start winning right now. Ottawa's defense is really good. Last week wasn't an indication of how they're going to play. Ottawa's offense just needs to have a bounce back, and I think they're going to have it against BC's defense, which in the first half of last week was just ugly. Save for a few plays, that first half could have been a lot uglier against Winnipeg. But I take Ottawa to come out with this one quite handily, and maybe a couple of reps for their backups, because I think they're going to run away with this one, 35-12. Tony.
I like BC mostly because they're running on Lulay power. They're running on emotion. They have Travis Lulay back. Everyone probably feels a little bit invincible now. They're probably running on that high. A lot of sports will kind of say that when a new coach comes in or a big change is made, they'll run this temporary high because of the change that was made, and maybe they're fueled by a little bit more. I don't expect a massive run for BC over the next couple weeks that will put them near the top of the Western Division. But I see a team right now that probably feels very confident, very comfortable under a leader like Travis Lulay. BC is so screwed overall because one day they're going to wake up this season and say, oh, frig, we have nothing for a quarterback going forward because we've given up on John Jennings. This team loves Travis Lulay, and we cannot build a football team around Travis Lulay. His time has passed. Now, until we hit that wall for the BC Lions, I'll give them one more victory because of the high. And Calgary, even if it's Calgary's defense, it seemed to jam up Trevor Harris and that Ottawa offense just a little bit too easily. The second there was any pressure early on in the football game, that offense just could not seem to operate as a unit. And yes, it is the Calgary defense, but for some reason that things didn't work right away. If that BC defense can make Ottawa's offense uncomfortable early, it looks like they buckle quite easily. So I'll give BC the benefit of the doubt for being on the high, and away the benefit of the doubt for the Red Blacks that they can keep their composure under pressure. It's not going to be over the top crazy, but give me 25-23 Lions.
Wow, our first disagreement. The next game in BMO Field, the Toronto Argonauts hosting the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, both coming off disappointing losses. Tony, where do you see this one going?
It was tough, only because Toronto is a weird 500 football club. Not from the capacity I think they are great or blow minds, but somehow they just managed to end up as a 500 football club. So I don't know if I really want to take them because they could be a good enough football team to beat the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And the Winnipeg Blue Bombers looked pretty shaky after halftime last week. I actually gave up on the football game. I feel pretty stupid for giving up on it, but on the other note, the full story, I tweeted out that I gave up on the football game last week because it was 17-0 at half or something like that. But I'm not blaming my wife, but she came downstairs. It's like, I don't want to watch BC and Winnipeg. For some reason, she was just not in the mood to tolerate BC Winnipeg. So I watch comeback. So when I don't, just fold and look clowns, or Winnipeg folded and looked like clowns, or if BC was that dominant. It's going to take a lot to knock me off of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers bandwagon. This is a team I really would like to see good, and I think they've got a good enough team. So at the end of the day, I take Winnipeg Blue Bombers with a 21 win over the Argonauts.
Well, you know what I'm going to have to do now, right?
We got to pick Toronto.
I got to pick Toronto. I think they got a young quarterback, offensive weapons, and Winnipeg's defense is showing a shakiness for player or for quarterbacks. They'd be able to contain them in the pocket. Is James Franklin a pocket passer, or is he a pocket passer who loves to move his legs? If that's the case, I think Winnipeg might be done for quite handily, at least in the first half. It might be something that they could build back in the latter stages of that game. I think Winnipeg's coaching staff has a history of kind of out-coaching themselves, as we saw in the last couple of games. This is a team that really took it out of their star running back, a guy like Andrew Harris who had 100 yards for rushing in the first half, and just completely went away from him. And we saw that as the third down gambles that we just went straight to Chris Streveler, as high as mighty as we built him up to be in the last couple of weeks. But right now, when you're talking about a team that's as shaky, coming off that shaky victory or shaky loss on the road, and now they got to go across the country again to face into the defending Grey Cup champions, who obviously, to their part, hasn't been playing as good as they can. Obviously, the game is won in the trenches. I think Winnipeg's offensive line can handle the defensive pressure that Toronto has, but it's all about the defense. And as much as I think that Matt Nichols could probably shred the defense, I think James Franklin could shred the Winnipeg defense a little bit more, and I think Toronto comes out with this one 28-26, possibly on a last-second field goal. Last game of the week, I'll just friendly say this: 30-0 Calgary. I said the same thing when Drew Willie and the Alouettes went into Mosaic Field a couple of weeks ago. I said I just did not like Drew Willie against Saskatchewan's defense. lo and behold, he actually gets a touchdown, has a concussion issue. Jeff Matthews finishes the game, and Montreal wins their only game so far this year. You said it when you were talking about the Red Blacks. Calgary's defense it was like if Trevor Harris and William Powell are not claustrophobic after this week, I can imagine Drew Willie being the exact same. I can't imagine a scenario that you could paint for me, even the optimistic Alouette fans, where Drew Willie can march the ball against his Calgary defense. Drew freaking Willie, or the last time that he had a very good opening or a couple of opening game drives, it's been a while. Like, we're talking 2014 as a member of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in the early stages of that year. I just can't imagine. There's not a scenario where I can see this guy engineering touchdowns or field goals or even first downs against this team. I am literally going to I'm going to bet a shutout here. Watch Montreal win this one 30-7. But I'm going to predict Calgary 30-0. Tony.
Yeah, in the 9 teams in 9 weeks, I said basically the Calgary Stampeders don't better. They stayed way overcompensated because probably blew us the Grey Cup last year. Let's get even more possible for this on us. Is amazing Calgary. It's so strong. 21-7 Montreal. Or Calgary, not Montreal.
Oh,
21-7 Calgary.
You almost did it. You almost did it. All right, let's. Nice kudos for giving Montreal some points. I just don't see it. Well, that'll wrap it for episode 350 of the Rouge Radio podcast. You can follow our podcast on Twitter at Rouge Radio, myself at Rouge Dalts, Tony at Tony Rouge Radio. And do you want to discuss? We've the Canuck Play Studios. Do you want to talk about that?
Oh. It's so exciting. Yes, we're going to get a big contest coming up here very soon. The details will more than likely be released on Twitter. We'll cover it more. We want this to be very exciting because Canuck Play is getting ready to launch a Canadian football game. Now, it's Canadian teams, obviously licensing things here, so we'll tread lightly. But it is a game for those that love Canadian rules football and want to play it. They approached us here today with the big announcement that the game is going to be launched on December 31st, my birthday, and they are giving us keys, they're called, to download the game for free to your system, Xbox or PS. They have allowed us to give away full versions of this game, so stay tuned to the Rouge Radio podcast and our Twitter account for details on how you can be one of the first people to own a Canadian football rule game for your gaming system.
Oh, I can't wait! And we sent as soon as we got this message from David, we were texting each other, and you could literally see Tony was coming downstairs to Christmas morning. You could just sense that his eyes were just buzzing out of his face right now. He was like, "This is my wheelhouse. Radio contests are my life. I got this." So, stay tuned to our Twitter account at Rouge Radio, and of course, pay attention to our podcast, Spotify, Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher app, whatever you use to download your podcast. Pay attention because we'll have all the information in the next coming weeks as it is launched July 31st. Tony, any final thoughts?
Yeah, my final thought is keep hanging out with the Canadian Football League. We've had some rough football games here. Enjoy the season the best you can. Hopefully we've got some good plays, some good games coming up. And if nothing else, this weekend's game for Stampeders and the Montreal Alouettes, Nick Lewis is going to sign a one-day contract to retire where he should retire as a Calgary Stampeder. So good job on the Stamps and Nick Lewis to get together for that one as one of the greatest receivers that ever wore that horse on his helmet. Nick Lewis comes home for one game to retire right.
I thought you were going to take the opportunity to go off on Mike Riley.
Oh,
I guess not. No.
You know what? And it's like, oh God, I wish they played another game in Toronto. Oh, I wish we could if we could just take that rant on Mike Riley, because honestly, there is a little bit of me that's getting sick of this golden boy quarterback who can do no wrong, and because the 1 week he finally whines on national television about the loss to the Argos, I couldn't go on him full. And, now it would seem a little bit too late to do it, and it's a bit dated, but, I wanted to be able to go off on Mike Riley after his little whining about the end zones in Toronto. So maybe there'll be somebody else out east he can whine about if catches aren't made in the end zone by his receiver.
Yeah. So to counter that, because Tony went on a mini rant talking about last week's show, I'll do double duty for a dad joke.
All right, go. Yes.
All right. So last week you heard this one. I don't think a lot of people read this one, so I'll start out with this one. So I was reading a suspenseful book in Braille. I'm getting to the good part. I could just feel it. All right, so that one just doesn't really have that much of a sting to it, considering that you heard that last week.
That was a sympathy chuckle.
So a lot of people are like, "Oh, that was terrible delivery." Well, now you know though. So here's this week's dad joke. My boss said he'll fire the employee with the worst posture. I have a hunch it might be me.
There you go.
Hey, there we go. Ended on a good job. For Tony, I'm Dalts. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening. Find more great shows like this at CF Pod Network on Twitter.